Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is, well, it's extremely focused. We are going to cut through all the bewildering noise of the information age.
Right.
We want to give you a really comprehensive understanding of what we're calling the 2025 AI crisis. We've gone through a massive stack of sources, articles, research papers, industry reports.
And they all detail this unprecedented high-speed fusion of generative AI and our global information systems.
That fusion, it's promising so much in terms of efficiency, but at the same time, it's created two major crises that are, deeply intertwined.
They really are. First, you have this epidemic of high-stakes AI hallucinations, and these are plaguing professional fields that, they demand absolute accuracy.
And the second crisis.
The second is the structural collapse of information integrity across society. It's a phenomenon the sources are calling disordered discourse.
That's a key distinction, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're not just debating misinformation anymore. We're dealing with AI slop and something called jagged intelligence.
Jagged intelligence. I like that term.
Yeah, on one hand, you have a technology that can deliver truly remarkable efficiency. But on the other, it is catastrophically prone to profound errors, deep-seated bias, and, well, rapid weaponization.
It's powerful, but it's fundamentally unreliable in these high-stakes environments.
And the speed of adoption is what makes it all so critical right now.
Exactly. This isn't some slow-burn tech rollout. It's an explosion. A global survey from 2025 showed that weekly public use of tools like ChatGPT, it just jumped dramatically.
In just 1 year, right?
In a single year. From 18% of the public in 2024 to a staggering 34% in 2025.
Almost doubling the user base in 12 months. That's the speed of the crisis.
That speed means adoption is just wildly outpacing regulation and, maybe more importantly, the ethical readiness inside the institutions using this tech.
So when you put a system that generates plausible falsehoods in the hands of a third of the public...
The implications for our shared reality are immediate and profound.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our goal today is to give you a comprehensive shortcut understanding what all this means for factual accuracy, for systemic bias, and for, the very structure of trust in our society.
And the core challenge we see everywhere is this balancing act. You have the undeniable promise of AI efficiency, which, let's be honest, organizations desperately need.
But you're balancing that against these profound issues of factual accuracy, legal accountability, and inherent bias.
That's where our deep dive begins. We need to start by defining the core of the technical problem. What do these errors even look like? And what happens when they're deployed where accuracy is, non-negotiable?
Right. So let's start with the word that dominates every single discussion about Gen AI, hallucination. We hear it all the time, but what does it actually mean when a large language model, an LLM, hallucinates?
And why is it so much more dangerous than just a simple error?
Exactly.
Well, put simply, hallucinations happen when the AI generates false or misleading or just outright nonsensical information.
But it presents it like it's a fact.
With overwhelming confidence, and often with perfect grammar, sounding entirely factual. It's not really a bug in the code. The sources call it a failure of epistemology.
A failure of how the machine knows what is true.
Precisely. And the key takeaway here is why it happens. The AI isn't built on truth. It's built on statistical patterns.
So it's just a prediction engine.
Its entire function is to predict the most probable next word based on the trillions of data points it's been trained on, not based on any external understanding of reality or, factual accuracy.
That sounds a lot like what cognitive psychologists call System 1 thinking. It's fast, it's intuitive, it's pattern-based, and it's prone to making really confident errors.
That is an excellent analogy. LLMs operate almost entirely on that System 1 level. They're rewarded for being plausibly coherent, not for being verified.
So if it finds a gap in its knowledge...
It doesn't stop and say, I don't know. It synthesizes the most plausible-sounding answer, a confident lie, just to maintain the flow of the conversation.
So it's essentially a very advanced, high-stakes BS generator that gets rewarded for sounding completely convincing.
That's the danger. And the root causes of these flaws go right back to the AI's foundation, its training data. If the data is incomplete or outdated or has contradictions,
then the model learns to fill those gaps with plausible but wrong content.
It's garbage in, plausible garbage out, but scaled up exponentially.
Let's dig into that foundation a bit more. What specifically makes that initial training data so unreliable?
The sources point to 4 core limitations. First, if the data sets are incomplete or biased, the model just has these huge knowledge gaps it tries to hide. Second, if there's conflicting information in the training materials, which is, common when you're scraping the whole internet, the model can synthesize those contradictions incorrectly.
He has no way to arbitrate between two conflicting facts.
Exactly. Third, outdated data. The AI just won't reflect current realities, leading to confidently false information about recent events or new regulations.
And the last one.
Finally, if the source materials themselves weren't fact-checked, think about Reddit threads or unverified blogs. The models just absorb those original inaccuracies. And often they prioritize the most frequently repeated falsehood.
This means the training data creates a foundation for systemic hallucinations, not just one-off mistakes. And the sources are really clear that these aren't just technical glitches. They have severe professional and ethical fallout.
Especially when they're used in fields that rely on absolute factual integrity.
This is where it gets really high stakes.
Absolutely. The sources single out several areas, but let's focus on the two most vulnerable, where the potential for, financial and legal ruin is highest.
And those are?
The legal profession and the judicial system and the world of education and academic research.
Okay, let's start with the law. A whole system is built on precedent and verifiable fact. What happens when AI hallucinations get into a courtroom or a lawyer's office?
The vulnerabilities are just profound, and we've already seen this happen in the real world. The most obvious threat is the fabrication of case citations.
Making up court cases.
AI systems can create completely non-existent court cases, but they look real. They have convincing names, dates, jurisdictions, legal holdings. A lawyer on a deadline might trust it, file a motion, and then face severe sanctions when the judge finds out the precedent just doesn't exist.
That wouldn't just derail the case. It could end a lawyer's career.
And beyond citations, you get false legal precedents, plausible interpretations that are just wrong under current law. If a lawyer uses that to advise a client on, say, a multi-million-dollar merger, the results are catastrophic.
And then there are contract errors.
Right, where the AI hallucinates clauses or terms that aren't legally enforceable, it creates unintended obligations, or worse, it omits critical protections.
So the output sounds right, but it's a ticking time bomb of non-compliance.
Precisely. And finally, you get regulatory compliance misinformation, false guidance on current laws or licensing rules. This is making compliance officers terrified of using these general models. The legal domain is just fundamentally incompatible with the hallucination risk.
That's a massive problem. Okay, let's move to academia and education. The stakes are different, but just as foundational. This threatens the core process of knowledge transfer itself.
The implications for academic integrity are severe. It's like corrupting the source material. We're already seeing students and researchers citing false research papers or studies that do not exist in their theses.
And it's coupled with fabricated historical facts, right?
Yes, where the AI generates incorrect historical events or figures that sound totally convincing to someone who doesn't already know the subject in depth.
The sources also mention scientific misinformation, which seems even more dangerous given how much we need to trust medicine and science.
Correct. This includes generating false scientific principles, formulas, or experimental results that are presented as verified fact. Imagine a university chemistry department using a model to draft exam questions.
And it embeds a fundamentally incorrect physical constant.
Exactly. And from an institutional view, universities risk major curriculum errors if their materials are based on hallucinated data. It all points to this systemic problem where Gen AI, if it's not checked, can corrupt the whole knowledge creation process from the ground up.
It's one thing to say this could happen, but the sources actually give us specific data on how often it is happening. Can you break down those numbers for us?
Yeah, this data really highlights the risk, and it shows this huge gap between the best models and the industry average. For general knowledge, a top-tier model might have a low hallucination rate, say 0.8%, which seems tolerable.
PR.
The industry average jumps to 9.2%. That means nearly 1 in 10 general queries on an average tool is completely fabricated.
That's already high, but it gets terrifying when we look at the specialized fields.
Exactly. For scientific research, the hallucination rate for a top-tier model is 3.7%, but the industry average is a staggering 16.9%.
Wow.
But legal information is the highest risk of all. The best models are at 6.4%, but the industry average is 18.7%.
An almost 1 in 5 chance that the legal information you get from an average AI tool is completely made up. Why is the legal field so much more susceptible than, say, science or medicine.
It goes back to the nature of the data. Scientific principles often rely on fixed, verified constants and broad theories that show up again and again in the training data, so they're statistically robust.
But legal information is different.
Legal information relies on specific, sometimes rare precedents. A single ruling from a circuit court in 1970 might only appear once in the whole training set.
It's unique data, not generalized.
Precisely. The model has less statistically robust information to anchor to. So if it gets a request for a novel legal concept, it just defaults to that plausible System 1 response, synthesizing names of lawyers and courts into a fake but coherent-sounding case.
It fundamentally undermines the trust that was promised.
It does. And what's really fascinating, something the sources point out, is this paradox. Some of the newer, more advanced reasoning models are sometimes worse at just simple factual retrieval.
Wait, how can that be? Better reasoning should mean better facts, right?
You'd think so, but on specific benchmark tests, some of these advanced reasoning models actually show higher hallucination rates than older, simpler models.
Why would that happen?
The sources suggest it's because the model is prioritizing a complex, logical chain of thought, the reasoning, over simply retrieving a verified data point. When it builds a complex argument, it increases the chance of an error creeping into that logical chain.
It's focused on how to solve the problem, not on verifying the facts it's using.
Exactly. It prefers a coherent, reasoned answer, even if the building blocks are wrong. This is what leads to jagged intelligence, brilliant execution, combined with catastrophic factual flaws.
So we've seen how AI can fabricate facts at the professional level. Now let's look at the media world, which operates under even more intense time pressure. Here, the fabrication rate isn't measured by law, but by public scrutiny and the speed of the news cycle.
Right. And our sources suggest that by late 2025, Gen AI integration in journalism is, it's pretty much universal. But the motivation and the caution levels vary dramatically around the world.
It's a classic efficiency versus ethics dilemma.
Amplified by geography and resources. So journalists in the global south and emerging economies are embracing AI widely. More than 80% use AI tools in their work, often daily.
And that's driven by a practical need.
A very immediate need, bridging significant resource gaps. We're talking about transcription, translation, basic content drafting. It lets the human journalists focus on the actual investigative work.
That makes perfect sense, using AI for the tedious work. But that's a sharp contrast with Western newsrooms, where resources are also tight, but the caution is much higher.
It is. Newsrooms in Western Europe show high usage, but also a high degree of anxiety. A clear majority, 62% of journalists view AI as a significant threat to the industry's health. Only 15% see it mainly as an opportunity.
So they fear replacement, loss of quality, and the erosion of public trust if AI makes mistakes.
Pretty much. The economic logic is compelling. AI cuts the cost per article. But what's the actual qualitative cost?
So what is it?
The cost, too often, is accuracy and trust. While 62% of journalists think AI can improve technical quality, grammar, SEO, they're insistent it cannot replace human editorial judgment.
And the evidence of failure is pretty striking.
It is. In the first quarter of 2025 alone, over 12,000 AI-generated articles had to be removed from digital platforms.
12,000.
12,000 articles removed because of fabrications or significant factual errors.
That's a huge number. And were those articles fully autonomous AI slop? Or were they human-led with AI assistance? That seems like a crucial distinction.
It is, and the vast majority fall into a gray area. They were human-commissioned, but largely AI-generated, often with very minimal human review.
So the errors were rooted in that same problem we discussed.
Exactly. The model is trained to satisfy the user's request for a quick, confident, complete article. It's designed to sound authoritative, not to admit it doesn't know something. And that pressure leads directly to fabrication, which human editors, also under time pressure, just failed to catch.
Which brings us to the policy gap challenge. If everyone is using this technology, shouldn't there be universal, transparent guidelines?
Logically, yes. But organizationally, it's a massive failure. Over 80% of journalists use AI, but only a tiny fraction of newsrooms, about 13 to 20% of local and independent ones, have public AI usage policies.
That's the critical failure point. It creates this vacuum of accountability. What's stopping them?
The main barrier is lack of time and bandwidth. Smaller organizations are just struggling to keep up with the technical complexity, the legal liability, the ethical considerations. They're trying to survive, and policy drafting takes a back seat.
Without that transparency, they risk eroding the very trust they're trying to build to their audience. A clear policy is vital for explaining things like fairness, transparency, and accountability.
Policies are essential. They build trust, and they help journalists understand the limitations of the tools, avoiding that dangerous over-reliance on AI that led to those 12,000 bad articles. It moves AI from a black box to a verified, scoped tool.
Now let's look at how news delivery itself is changing. The sources identify this massive shift away from institutional journalism toward individuals, a phenomenon they're calling the creatorification of news.
This is a huge trend that AI and digital platforms are accelerating dramatically. Engagement with traditional media TV, print, news websites, it's falling globally. Meanwhile, reliance on social media, video platforms, and online aggregators just keeps growing.
The audience is migrating to personalities they trust, or at least find entertaining.
And the numbers are huge. The sources show that after the 2025 inauguration in the U.S., 22% of the sample reported encountering news or commentary from podcaster Joe Rogan in that week alone.
And this is a global trend.
It is. In France, a young news creator named Hugo Travers, or Hugo Decrypt, reaches 22% of all under 35s, mainly through YouTube and TikTok.
These aren't just big numbers. They're reaching audiences that traditional outlets really struggle to connect with.
The trend is mixed. Some see this creatification as a positive thing, offering fresh perspectives and connecting with younger demographics. But others, including senior editors in established newsrooms, worry that it risks flattening complex narratives.
And that it prioritizes opinion and engagement over rigorous fact-based journalism.
Exactly. And as AI empowers these individuals to generate content at a massive scale, the ability to flood the zone with synthetic media becomes a profound verification challenge.
A challenge that traditional media is just not equipped to handle.
Not at all. The threat of deepfakes and convincing synthetic media, audio, video, images generated in minutes, it completely overwhelms the traditional manual editorial safeguards journalism has always relied on.
Safeguards like source confirmation, waiting for 3 independent sources, things that take time.
Right. Those were built for a world where deception required resources and skill. Now, the time is near zero and the resources are minimal. The result for editors is this untenable binary choice.
Wait, spend time verifying and risk being late, or publish quickly and risk amplifying a deepfake.
And in the age of viral media, being late means being irrelevant.
So the verification process itself has to change completely.
It has to shift from a manual slowdown to a real-time technical requirement. Newsrooms need to embed real-time verification capabilities into their workflows, things like Reality Defender's RealScan. Verification has to happen at the speed of the modern news cycle. If the tools can generate the slop in minutes, the tools have to be able to verify it in seconds.
This issue of factual integrity becomes particularly sharp and, politically charged when we start talking about topics like climate change. Our sources introduce this concept of disordered discourse.
Right, the idea that the information crisis is actually eroding the pillars of a healthy democracy: verification, deliberation, and accountability.
What does that mean exactly? Disordered discourse.
It's defined as the disintegration of the systems society relies on for a shared, functional understanding of reality. In this environment, misinformation isn't just a factual error anymore, it becomes a matter of identity.
So trying to correct it is seen as a personal attack.
Exactly. Correction is betrayal, and truth becomes functionally irrelevant. It's not just about spreading lies, it's about demanding participation in a culture of denialism, where posting fake images or selling climate scam merchandise becomes a profitable performance.
And the climate crisis, happening at the exact same time as this information crisis, is a critical front line. Why is the climate conversation so susceptible to this?
Because of the platform business models and the financial drivers behind them. The core mechanism is the engagement-driven algorithm. These algorithms are designed to amplify content that provokes strong emotions: anger, fear, shock.
Because outrage drives engagement.
Research in journals like Science confirms it. Outrage fuels engagement far more effectively than balanced, factual information. Facts are boring. Outrage pays the bills.
And AI supercharges this outrage machine.
It accelerates and amplifies everything, creating fake content, hyper-specific micro-targeting, and the spread of bot farms, flooding the environment with AI slop. This brings the cost of producing massive amounts of sophisticated disinformation down to basically nothing.
Which makes it accessible to any small, motivated group. Let's get into the specific tactics used by these vested interests. The fossil fuel industry, ideologically motivated groups, what the sources call the climate obstruction playbook.
There are several sophisticated moves. First is political polarization. Climate skepticism rarely exists in a vacuum. It often coexists with anti-feminist, anti-immigration, and vaccine-skeptical content.
So it's all part of a larger worldview.
This blending of ideologies strengthens the resilience of the disinformation network. Different grievance groups draw from a shared well of distrust and coordinated messaging. It creates this robust, mutually supporting echo chamber.
Which means you can't tackle climate denial in isolation. You have to address the broader structural distrust.
Exactly. Second, we see massive astroturfing campaigns. This is the use of fake accounts, often with AI-generated profile pictures and messaging, to mimic widespread grassroots support.
There was a concrete example of this around COP28,
A
right?
very clear one. Before and during COP28, AI-generated accounts published at least 30,000 similar tweets, all pushing narratives that favored specific national interests. For instance, promoting the UAE as the perfect host for the summit.
The goal being to manufacture a consensus that the scientific consensus is weaker than it actually is.
Right, and if the cost of 30,000 tweets is near zero, this becomes a crisis of scale. The third tactic mentioned is strategic antagonism.
This one is more subtle.
It's a sophisticated way to undermine trust in institutions. These groups will link to mainstream news or government data like NOAA reports, not to endorse it, but to mock it or cite it completely out of context. They position themselves as critical insiders, exposing a corrupt establishment, eroding faith in the very institutions that provide factual data.
They use the appearance of rigor to promote radical skepticism. And this leads to this powerful call to defossilize knowledge. What does that mean?
That was highlighted by UN Special Rapporteur Elisa Morgera. She notes that this playbook of climate obstruction has negatively impacted fundamental human rights to information and science for decades. Defossilizing knowledge means ensuring accurate, science-based information is available.
But it's more than that.
It's also about critically interrogating the historical and current access and economic power that fossil fuel companies exert over the media landscape and other influential actors.
It's about holding corporate influence accountable.
It's about identifying the structural levers of obstruction. It goes beyond just PR. It's looking at the funding of think tanks, the purchase of ad space and major publications that might influence editorial balance, and ensuring academic institutions aren't unduly influenced. It's an effort to remove the structural mechanisms of informational corruption.
That addresses the external manipulation. But the crisis also involves inherent bias built into the AI systems themselves, right?
That's vital to remember. The systems are only as good as the data they're built on, and that data reflects historical, societal inequalities. So AI can perpetuate that inequality and exclusion if we're not vigilant.
Can you give us a clear example of that language bias?
Machine translation is a prime example. When translating from Hungarian, which is a gender-neutral language, into English, the system perpetuated clear, harmful gender stereotypes based on the probabilities in its training data.
So what was the output?
Things like, he makes a lot of money, she is baking a cake, he's a professor, she is an assistant.
So the AI isn't learning objective facts. It's learning historical prejudice and applying it with confidence.
Exactly. It's pattern replication masquerading as intelligence. We see similar biases in media portrayals based on visual content. Deep learning analysis showed that media portrayals of migrants predominantly focus on asylum seekers and associate them with poverty and risks.
So if you type migrant into an AI image generator, it's more likely to show you a picture of poverty or risk.
Precisely. The analysis also showed that in images of expats, white faces were significantly overrepresented, while Asian faces were underrepresented, and migrant women were generally underrepresented everywhere and consistently shown as younger than men.
It's just replicating a narrow, biased view of reality.
Which is why a purely technical fix, just tweaking an algorithm, isn't enough for these deep-seated issues.
It has to be more than that.
Absolutely. The sources strongly advocate for a multidisciplinary approach. Tackling these issues requires input from linguistics, sociolinguistics, ethics, and law. It's the only way to ensure AI promotes fairness and inclusion, rather than just accelerating existing social asymmetries.
So if the crisis is rooted in flawed data, algorithmic outrage, and inherent bias, what are the solutions? If the problem is AI slop at scale, then the solution has to be trust at scale. Let's start with the technical and engineering strategies.
The sources introduce this concept of attacks by content. This is about the subversion of autonomous AI agents by malicious data misinformation they find online.
This is critical because AI systems are increasingly being deployed as agents that go out and find information on their own.
Right, and because they forage without human oversight, they are inherently vulnerable to being misled by fake documents or fabricated data they find on the web.
So if an autonomous agent is researching a business problem and it finds a fabricated court case, like we talked about earlier,
Hmm.
what's its defense? How does it secure itself from the content?
The best defense is automated fact-checking, which the sources argue is a necessary security layer, not just a luxury.
It's built in.
The defense pipeline forces the agent to go find additional corroborating evidence to support or refute claims it finds. Critically, it then has to decide what's trustworthy based on source reputation and cross-referencing. Tools like Factiverse are already being used for this, providing real-time monitoring of claims across audio, video, and text.
So this shifts automated fact-checking from being just a journalistic tool to a critical component of AI security itself. It's like the agent's internal immune system.
That's a great way to put it.
And beyond defense, how are companies engineering trust into their core systems to reduce those hallucinations we talked about?
Developers are using specific techniques to build more reliable systems. Two key examples are Retrieval-Augmented Generation, or RAG, and Model Context Protocols, or MCP.
Okay, let's unpack RAG first. What does Retrieval-Augmented Generation actually do?
Our RAG essentially forces the AI to check its homework before it speaks. When a user asks a question, the AI first performs a retrieval step. It pulls verifiable, high-quality data from a trusted external source.
Like a corporate database or the curated legal library.
Exactly. It then uses that retrieved data to augment its output. This ensures the response is grounded in that trusted source material, dramatically reducing its reliance on patterns from flawed, generic training data.
So if you're in a highly regulated industry, the sources are saying your company should insist that its Gen AI vendor is using RAG internally to protect you.
Absolutely. Our RAG grounds the information in a secure, verifiable source. The second technique is the Model Context Protocol, or MCP. This is basically a defined set of rules and parameters applied to the model's environment, limiting its scope.
How so?
MCPs define boundaries for fact-checking. They instruct the model on how to handle ambiguity, for example, do not guess, state that the information is unavailable, and often include a human-in-the-loop framework for final quality control on high-stakes outputs.
That covers the technical security. But we also need to see efforts that actively promote inclusion and combat the biases we just discussed. What are some real-world projects doing that?
One great example is the European-led Sign-On project. It's focused on reducing the communication gap between hearing, deaf, and hard-of-hearing people. They're doing it through mobile apps for automatic translation between sign and spoken languages.
And the goal isn't just a technical tool.
No, the goal is to promote open communication and mutual trust between these communities, rather than some enforced inclusion model where the tech dictates the interaction.
And what about combating the systemic spread of targeted disinformation against minority groups?
That's the aim of the Search Guardian project. This initiative uses AI to monitor search engines and track the spread of disinformation related to LGBTQ+ communities across 8 European countries. And their analysis revealed a key finding about how platforms work.
What was that finding?
They found that major U.S. search engines, because of their internal policies, tend to prioritize mass or legacy media outlets. Now, this acts as a sort of soft filter against the most egregious extremist content.
But it centralizes control of the discourse.
Right. And critically, the non-U.S. independent search engines they looked at were much less likely to mask those alternative media outlets. They exposed users to more diverse, but also potentially more extremist viewpoints.
That's a crucial insight. Centralized curation protects users from the worst slop, but reinforces the institutional voice, while decentralized search exposes users to fringe views more readily.
Exactly. It raises big questions about who gets to decide what's authoritative and how easily users can fall into extremist rabbit holes.
Okay, let's talk about protecting the individuals on the front line of this, climate and environmental defenders. We mentioned the chilling effect of harassment. How do they build digital resilience?
Online trolling, smear campaigns, deepfake fabrications. It's a daily reality for environmental defenders. It creates this significant chilling effect that silences critical voices. The harassment is often personal, isolating, and compounded by the economic insecurity in that space.
It's not just a digital security problem, it's a mental health crisis.
It is. So the sources emphasize a holistic security approach: physical, digital, and psychosocial. Practically, this involves a few key steps. First, securing internal data with tools like PGP encryption. Second, they have to use OSINT open source intelligence to actively monitor and identify troll patterns and track where attacks are coming from.
Using the adversary's tools for defense.
Correct. For smaller groups, the sources advise partnering with larger organizations for support to take the brunt off teams without dedicated security staff.
And there's also advice on infrastructural independence, getting off platforms where their data might be vulnerable to seizure.
Yes, choosing self-hosted, independent infrastructures. The choice of hosting jurisdiction matters a lot. Countries like Switzerland or Iceland are often considered to offer strong data protection.
And domain choice is important too.
Extremely. All non-country domains like .com or .org fall under U.S. authority, which means agencies can seize the domain in certain circumstances. So choosing a country-level domain is often advised to retain jurisdictional control.
That level of caution says a lot about the threat landscape. Finally, how is journalism constructively responding to this crisis of AI slop and the news fatigue that makes people tune out?
The response is centered on solutions journalism, or SOJO. This is a rigorous reporting method that investigates credible responses to social problems, asking what works, for whom, and why. It shifts the lens from chronicling catastrophe to focusing on human agency.
It sounds like it directly combats that feeling of overwhelming helplessness.
It does, and the data shows it works. SOJO increases emotional connection and reader loyalty. Readers spend twice as much time on site viewing SOJO content compared to non-SOJO content, 103 seconds versus 51 seconds.
And the application is just to shift the focus.
From what went wrong to what is being done in response, while still interrogating corporate solutions and avoiding simplistic hero stories. It provides agency and clarity to the reader instead of paralyzing despair.
So, to synthesize our deep dive, what we've seen is this dual nature of AI in 2025. It's a powerful engine for efficiency.
But at the same time, it's polluting the information environment with AI slop and accelerating societal division through algorithmic outrage.
And the sources are clear. The solution isn't just technical. It hinges on ethical frameworks, transparency, and human-centric approaches like solutions journalism and digital resilience.
The battle for factual integrity is now synonymous with the battle for institutional and democratic health.
And one of the most critical structural challenges that courts and lawmakers still need to resolve is all about accountability, particularly in the U.S.
Precisely. We're talking about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. It shields online platforms from liability for third-party content. But with Gen AI, the line of accountability is fundamentally blurred.
Because Section 230 protects content from the user, not content the platform materially contributes to creating.
So if a user inputs a malicious prompt, that's protected. But if the AI model itself fabricates a defamatory output, where does the blame lie?
It depends on the interpretation of material contribution.
It does. When an AI chatbot generates that output, it's influenced by the user's prompt, the developer's fine-tuning, the biased training data, and the proprietary algorithms. The question of whether the developer materially contributed to the harmful content remains profoundly ambiguous in U.S. law.
And that legal uncertainty needs to be clarified fast to assign real accountability.
It does.
Fascinating. To leave you with a final thought from our sources, consider this number. Globally, only 22% of the public has received any formal or informal news literacy training. Given the crisis of AI slop, high-stakes hallucinations, and deepfakes, what would it mean for your community or your profession if that number suddenly tripled? That's something to think about as you navigate this new, jagged reality.